Hello, hello, hello. Let's look at Genesis chapter 4 and try and figure out why God rejected Cain's sacrifice. It's a really interesting one. So in Genesis chapter 4, it's the story of Cain or Cain. We're going to go from chapter 4 verse 1 to chapter 4 verse 13. Just a little deep dive. And remember, this is coming right on the heels of Adam and Chava, the man and the woman leaving Gan Eden, and we had this big debate about, were they punished? Was it a punishment? I argued that yes, the snake was definitely, cursed. We used the word curse, a roar, but what were the consequences of Adam leaving? He had to get a job and work as a farmer. He had to work hard. Well, that makes sense. Before he was in Gan Eden, everything was provided for him, just like a little child. And now he's going to, dig a ditch. He's going to plant dada, kutz for dada, thorns and thistles, but he's going to harvest grasses, and by the sweat of his brow, he'll eat bread. So that looks like he's planting difficult plants, harvesting better plants, and turning it into real food. So he's going to be successful. With the woman, she's going to have babies. Having babies is going to be difficult. But ultimately, having babies isn't a curse. We've never thought of having babies as a curse. And ultimately, it was the snake that was cursed, and it was lowered down to the ground. And I argued that this is because when the snake was whispering in the ear, it was very persuasive. And after they made their choice and they had to go and live in the world, God lowered the snake so that it wouldn't be so persuasive. So the whole idea was that at the point that they left and the snake was weakened, it wasn't so much of a challenge. It wasn't the Yetzer Hara, the desire to do something other than what God instructed, was weak, so that we can overcome it. And the whole point was for us to walk away with the idea that God is saying, I believe that you can overcome. And then in the first verse of chapter 4, it says, Va'adam, and the man, Yada et Chava, he knew Chava, Eve, Ishto, his wife. Now, we've heard this in popular language before, we know that the biblical phrase to know one's wife is obviously talking about, knowing her intimately, such that Vatahar, she became pregnant, Vateled et Cain, and she bore the child which is Cain. Right now we say Cain in English. This is because you have the ka sound at the beginning. We have an a vowel, a yod with a chirik. So this is ai, and then so we transliterate this as ai in English, and then a final nun. So nun. So we say Cain because in English you combine the two letters, the two vowels in the middle, like a diphthong. But in Hebrew, you say ka yin, so we separate those two vowels. So that's the only reason. That's the only difference between Cain and Cain. For Tomer, and she said, Keniti ish et Adonai. So what she's saying is, this is why I've called the child Cain. It comes from the verb keniti, and keniti can mean to purchase, but really it means to acquire. So if you go to the shopping mall in Israel, it's called a canyon, because it's the place that you kone. You can say, Ani rotze liknot, I want to buy a kos cafe, a cup of coffee. And afterwards you would say, kaniti kos cafe, I bought a cup of coffee. So it sounds like she's saying, I bought an ish, a man, et Adonai, from God. But actually what she's saying is, I've come to possess a person because of God. Now, immediately thinking that's a strange thing to say, but remember, this is the first child born. She's never experienced this before. So the point that she becomes a mother when she's never seen that done before is pretty spectacular. I've got a person because of God. Now, purists of the grammar might be saying, well, et doesn't mean from God, or it doesn't mean by God. It's an object marker. So this is true. She has acquired a child, and the object, the source, happens to be God, the Yod, the Hey, and the Vav and the Hey. This is the name of God that we don't pronounce, so we use other metaphors for it. So we don't pronounce this one, but we do say things like Adonai, which means my master, and that's a placeholder until we're allowed to say that name again. So let's go a little bit further. He knows his wife. She bears a child, she names it, and she names it about the fact that she acquired a child. But there's a subtle other thing here, that kana sounds like to purchase or acquire. That's the root. That's what she intended. But there's also a second word which is very, very similar, which is kana, which means to be jealous. So she intended this to be about the fact that she acquired a child, and actually she foreshadowed the fact that this would be a person of jealousy. That's a kind of subtle poetical little hint there. Now, V'tosef leledet. Now you can see here, this is just like, I clicked on, I always do that. This is just like the great sage, scholar, prophet, hero of the Bible, Yosef, right? If this was a male verb, if this was a male doing a verb, you would actually trade this taf for a yod, and it would be V'yosef. So I think, well, why does it sound like it's talking about Joseph? Well, what was the great act that Joseph did in order to save all of the people? He acquired, he piled up, he gathered, he added to the storehouses of Egypt. So him being called Yosef, although we're giving a reason at the time that, oh, God has again given me a child, actually it does foreshadow the fact that Joseph will add to something. And in this case, V'tosef means, and she added to, or she again, leledit. Again, this is from yalad, to bear a child, so she bore another child, effectively. Et achiv, which refers to his brother. Achi is a brother. The vav at the end is the third person, masculine or neutral possessive. So his, achi, his brother. And it says et hevel. So we have two ets, but they're actually referring to the same character. His brother and Hevel. And Hevel is commonly known in English as Abel. This is due to the complicated relationship with transliterating a language that uses letters differently than yours. But there's also foreshadowing in this name. It's very sad, because the meaning of Hevel is a fleeting breath. And of course, you know, because you've read this story before, Hevel doesn't get a very long time in the game. So to call him a fleeting breath is really to say the kind of the preciousness. She intends the preciousness of just but a fleeting sigh, but actually there's foreshadowing of the fact that he's going to die. Very sad. Vayhi Hevel. Now, the root here is hi. Yehi means it will be. Vayhi, this tense flipping vav, Vayhi means it was. And it was that Hevel was a ro'ei tzon. He was a pasturer of flocks. Ro'ei with an ayin isn't to do with ra'ah, which is evil. It's to do with ra'ah, which is pasture, tend, graze, feed. So he was a pasturer, he was a shepherd, effectively, of tzon, of flocks. V'kayin haya, and Cain was. You see how vayehi is a future tense to be, it will be, but it's got a tense flipper to flip it into the past. But haya is just the past tense. Especially in the early days, the Torah keeps on using the same verb either in the past tense or in the future tense flipped into the past to show us that both of those are an option. So it kind of introduces the basics of grammar in these early chapters, which is very, very thoughtful of the Torah. Vakayin haya, and Cain was an oved adamah. This is much like his father. You know, when Adam was sent out of Gan Eden into the world, he was encouraged to farm arable. You know, he was supposed to work the ground, he was supposed to plant plants and harvest plants and make bread. And this is what Cain's doing. He's following exactly in his father's footsteps. Nothing wrong with this. So far, so good. Two lads, very quickly, in but a verse, they grow up and get jobs and they're producing food. This is all good. Cain, haya, oved, adamah. He was a server of the earth. Not Adam, but adamah. So Adam, the masculine version of this noun, is the person or mankind. Adamah is the feminine, which is the earth. And the reason the names are very similar and they're linked is because Adam was drawn out of the earth. The first Adam was drawn from the dirt and turned into a person, you know, whether this is physically or metaphorically, whether he was drawn out of the primeval ooze or whether he was metaphorically part spirit of God and part earthly physicality. Either way, there's a very strong link between Adam and Adamah. So Cain is doing what his father did. And then we have something really wonderful and special. In the third verse of chapter 4, it says, Vayihi, and it was, Miketz Yamim. Now, don't misunderstand. If you translate this directly into English, it can sound, pretty intimidating, because it says Miketz, from the Kates is the end, Yamim, and it was the end of days, and you think, oh no, short story. We only got 4 chapters of this book and it's given up. But no, don't worry. The reason it says Kates is because if you think about the Jewish year, when is the new year? When is Rosh Hashanah? And of course, it's in the autumn. Classically, it's either September or October. We start the new year, which means when's the end of the year? Well, the end of the year is the summer. So in the autumn, we gather up all the stuff, clear out the land, prepare everything ready for the planting in the spring. We plant in the spring and we harvest in the summer. So in the Kates Yamim, in the end of the days, it's not the end of all days, it's the end of the days of the year. That's summer, that's harvest time. So it's saying Vayehi mi Kates Yamim, and it was in the harvest of the year. Vayavei Kayin mi pri ha'adama. Now, you know about the Parsha Bo, right? This is Bet Aleph, is Bo. Bet Aleph is the root to come. But this is a different version of the verb to come. You see how we've got these more intense vowels here. We've got a tzere underneath the vet. So vayavei doesn't mean to come. We also lost the dagesh. It means to bring. It's actually a hifil. You can't see the extra hey and the extra yod in this case, but it is a hifil. It's to cause something to come. Now, if I said to you, please cause for me to come a coffee from the kitchen, if I was going to speak like that, absolutely cryptically, you'd be thinking, what do you mean cause to come from the kitchen? What you mean is bring from the kitchen. So this is saying that he brought, Cain did, mi pri, from the fruit, ha'adam, from the fruit of the ground. Again, in Torah thinking, pri ha'etz, like an apple, for example, is pri ha'etz. It's a fruit of the tree that stays up all year round, whereas the fruit of the trees that are, the fruit of the plants which are close to the ground, they die back every year. This is pri ha'adam, the fruit of the ground. So this is vegetables, effectively. So he's bringing the vegetables. Okay, nothing wrong with that. It says mincha ladonai. Now, of course, you probably know that afternoon prayers are called mincha. So he's like, what? He's bringing afternoon prayers to God? No. Mincha, the afternoon prayers, is named after an offering to God, a gift to God. Because we, in the absence of our temple at the moment, please God, it will be soon restored. We'll have peace for us and everyone else. And we'll have the temple service will be restored. We'll bring sacrifices again in the temple. In the meantime, we bring prayers because there's no option to bring temple sacrifices, and that's the only place we're allowed to bring them. So mincha is an offering. So Cain brought from the fruits of the ground an offering to God. This is wonderful. In fact, this is the first mention of bringing sacrifices to God in the whole Bible. God had a very close relationship with Adam and with Chava. Maybe they even brought sacrifices, but we don't hear about it. It's never mentioned. This is the first mention of someone bringing an offering, a sacrifice, a gift to God. This is surely a very good thing, a very special thing. Let's see how it goes. Well, we go on further, and it says, V'hevel hevi gamhu. Hevel, the brother of Cain, Hevi, you'd see this is the same word, but slightly, you can actually see the hey in the yod to show that this is a hifil. So it's not bo to bring, it's ve, hevi is to, sorry, it's not bo to come, it's hevi to bring. Gam, who, gam means also, who is him. So Hevel also brought, right, mi bekorot tsono. So a bikor is a firstborn. We have the Tzom HaBikurim is the fast of the firstborn child. We also have Yom HaBikurim, which is the bringing of the first fruits. So whatever is the first of your harvest. If you're a farmer, it might be your harvest. If you're a lawyer, it might be money that you've earned as a lawyer. If you're a scientist, it might be, the money you've been saving up from your wage, or maybe your discoveries you want to dedicate, or if you're a musician, you want to dedicate a couple of songs to God. Whatever it is, the fruit of your labor, you bring in Yom HaBikurim, which is Shavuot. So, but notice this is mi bikor, which means from the firstborn, and you notice as well it has an ot ending, which is the exclusively feminine ending. So it's from the firstborn females, so no, of Tson is a flock, and the Vav, the little kippur on top at the end, that means his. So the firstborn females from his flock. Why the females? Well, because if you are a farmer of sheep or a farmer of cows, you know that the females are worth a lot more than the males. Why? Because a male can impregnate many females in a flock. Just keep it with the animals. So you have one male and you have lots of females. And so through the year, if you're eating from your flock, you're going to eat the males. Because you can keep one, you can eat the rest of them, right? That's how it works on a farm, right? Whereas the females are very valuable. They can produce more offspring. They can produce more animals, which will eventually become meat, or they will expand your flock. If you're a dairy farmer, you still want to keep on expanding your herd of cows so you can keep on producing milk. So what this is saying is, I'm going to sacrifice the thing that will make me more wealthy. I'm going to give it to you before I take it for me. Right? Now, so in that incidents, he's not just bringing a sacrifice, he's bringing the best of what he has to offer, right? And then it adds, it says, "U and may chelvehen." Now the "u" is and, the "may" is from. We have chalav. Chalav is milk, right? But chelev is the kind of the choicest of the milk. It's like the cream, the cream of the cream, the cream of the crop. Right? You take the milk, and when it settles, you skim off the creamiest bit off the top. So it's like the best of the milk. So he's bringing the best of the herd, and then he doesn't stop there. He brings the best of the milk. And by the way, this ending hen is the feminine they. So hem means them, whether they're a mixed group or a masculine group, but hen is only theirs when they're exclusively feminine. Now that makes sense because you can't get milk from a bull, or if you do, it's not something that you would bring as an offering. But hen is exclusively feminine, so he's bringing these female firstborn cows and the milk that would have fed them. He's bringing all of this to God. Vayisa. Vayisha, and sha'a is to look on, to regard, to accept, to behold, to acknowledge. So it says Vayisha Adonai el Hevel. God recognized Hevel. To Hevel, he turned his eyes to Hevel. Ve'el minchato, and to his offering. But Ve'el kayin, Ve'el minchato, lo sha'a. To Cain and to his offering, he did not acknowledge it. Now this is a really important question. Why not? What's the issue? What, does God just not like salad? Does he not eat his vegetables? He just really likes, to take ice cream and then have a burger afterwards? What's going on here? So, it's interesting to witness Cain's reaction. So in the first instance, he brought something. Very commendable. Nothing wrong with that. Then his brother comes along and his brother brings something better. And it's like, well, that's easy if you're the second player. You can look at what your brother brought and you go, I'm going to outdo him. I'm going to bring better. But that doesn't undermine, surely that doesn't undermine that Cain was the first one to ever think of bringing a sacrifice just because his brother outdid him. Why is he? Is he in competition with his brother now? But you have to remember, one, God knows the hearts of the people who are doing this. And two, God doesn't do stuff because he's angry, because he loses his temper. God is a parent, and a good parent doesn't lose their temper just because they're grumpy and they wanted a better present from their kids. What kind of parent does that? Your two children bring you presents, and you react equally. So if you can do that, how come God can't? How come God's losing his temper over the fact that I like this one, and he's just ignoring that one? That sounds like a bad parent. Are we assuming God's a bad parent? Let's give God the benefit of the doubt. After God doesn't acknowledge, he doesn't reject, but he doesn't acknowledge Cain's sacrifice, it says, V'yichar l'Cain. It effectively means, yichar is the verb, to become hot, angry, furious, burn, to kindle an anger. So not just to become angry, but to kindle that anger is to maintain it, to sit there and brood and sulk, right? It says, V'yichar l'Cain me'od. He very much was kindling this anger. V'yipalu, nafal is to fall. We've lost the nun because it's a weak letter off the beginning of the verb. V'yipalu means, and they fell, panav, his face fell. So now he's sitting there, as a toddler would, sulking with his face down and he's angry. And, why did God take yours and not mine? Well, here comes the problem. There's nothing wrong with being upset about this. There's nothing wrong with wishing that yours had been accepted. But what is the wise reaction? The wise reaction is to say, okay, that didn't work. Is it possible that I did something wrong? Is it possible that I could do something better? You've got God right there. At this stage of humanity, you can ask God, why didn't you take mine? What did I do wrong? And then there would be a sacrifice. There would be an exchange. And he maybe could improve his sacrifice. And maybe he could improve his relationship. Maybe he could look at his brother and go, well, I brought vegetables, but he went further. Can I bring another one that's even better? Can I elevate my relationship with God by being willing not just to give him something from mine, but the best from mine? Maybe he'll bless me more and I'll get even better. Or maybe we'll just become closer. Whatever it is. The failing of Cain wasn't the vegetables. The failing was in the refusal to consider that he might improve. In the refusal to accept the kind of implied criticism of God not taking his sacrifice. Right? So, how do we know this? Because then God comes and talks to Cain. All he's done is acknowledge the sacrifice of Hevel, but he hasn't said anything to him. But actually God sits down and he says, V'yomer Adonai el Cain, God says to Cain, Lama chara lach, why is it that you're angry? V'lama napalu panecha, and why is your face fallen? He hasn't rejected Cain. He wants to talk to him. Now I want to tell you a little bit about my perspective on this, why my perspective is so effective from my old job. I used to work in a school for children who'd been excluded from mainstream education. Right? They had behavioural problems, and there wasn't a child in there who didn't have a really good reason for behavioural problems. You don't get bad kids. You get recovering kids, right? There's kids who had been neglected by whoever it was that was raising them, often not the traditional family. It might be whoever was available to pick up if they lost their parents, or if their parents had problems so bad that they weren't in a position to look up and look after children. Whatever it was, there was a really good reason for every single child. And so when they failed in managing their emotions or managing their behavior, or sometimes they would turn violent, we all knew why. And we weren't angry at them. We were just thinking, how do I get you to a place where this works better? How do I teach you the skills to cope with life so that you don't resort to violence, or you don't resort to a meltdown? So we were there to teach primary school, elementary school, but we were also there to teach how to be around other people without it all going wrong. So I remember a particular day where I saw a child bubbling at the back of the room. Everything was irritating and he was expressing distress. And I knew why. I knew what was happening in his family home at the time. And he had very good reasons not that he wasn't coping. If I was his age and I'd been through what he'd been through, I wouldn't have coped either. But we were coming up to lunchtime. He was going to go out on the playground, and I knew he was going to hit this kid. I could see it. I'd seen it before. Sadly, I'll see it again. And I needed him to talk to me before he went. I needed to intervene before he hit that kid. But I went over to him and said, how you doing? You okay? Fine. Do you want to talk about it? No. Okay. So what am I going to do? There are adults in the playground that can intervene, but they'll only intervene when it's too late. They'll see him hit the kid. And then he's going to have all those consequences. So I wound him up a little bit. I didn't do things as quickly as he wanted me to. I didn't give him necessarily everything he wanted to. And I pushed his buttons a little bit. And sometimes that was important. So he lost his temper. And I said, right, just give me a couple of minutes of your time. You're still going out on lunch, but we need to have a chat before you go. So he sits down, okay. And we had a bit of a talk about it. We diffused it. I got him to focus on why he was angry and about how it wasn't that kid's fault. That kid was annoying him, but I gave him other options to not be near that kid while that kid was annoying him. He didn't hit the kid. It all worked out okay in that incident. So here we have God looking at Hevel, bringing everything he can with an open heart, and looking at Cain and going, here's some vegetables, I grew them myself. And he goes, right, I can accept this sacrifice. I can treat them as if they're the same, but they're not the same. Hevel has brought the best of the best of the best with a full heart, and Cain has brought some things, and that's good too, but it's not really on that level. So I need him to understand he's got an anger problem. He's got a self-management problem. We need to have the chat, but he's got to do something before I can have the chat. So I don't accept his sacrifice. This time, maybe we'll talk about it. He got angry, and now I intervene, says God. Why are you angry? Why is your face fallen? And he tells a little bit more. He goes on to say, Halo im tetiv set. Now, this is a special hay. This isn't the normal hay you get. So lo here, lamed vav aleph is the same root as the lo, which means no. Normally we just see lamed aleph, two letters, but here we have the full 3-letter root here, which is lo with a vav, same word. But the hay is doing a special job of sometimes a hay can turn a phrase into a question, right? So instead of being the no, what this is really saying is it not so? Right? So this is turning the statement I'm going to make into a question, right? Is it not so that im tetiv, that if you will do good? Now notice, it's not about the past. It's not if you had done good in the past. It's if you will do good. God is always assuming that you're going to do better in the future. He's always believing that you can do good. And he leads with the positive, not with the negative. Halo im tetiv, isn't it so that if you will do good, sate, which is from nasa, which is to lift up, bear up, carry, elevate, right? Like NASA, that's the way to remember that. Whenever you see the verb nasa, think about NASA, because their whole job is lifting stuff up into space. Whenever you see nasa, nave, it means he lifted his eyes, right? So this is sate, it will be lifted. If you do good, it will be lifted up. It will be elevated. The reward for doing good is the opportunity to do more good, and the punishment for doing bad is more bad. So make your choices. If you do good, won't it be lifted up? And im lo tetiv. And if you don't do good, what's the consequences? Lepetach chatat rovetz. This is a time when we're living in tents. We haven't got houses yet. So you don't have a delet, you don't have a door. You have a petach, you have an opening in your tent. So lepetach, to the opening of your tent, effectively, chatat, sin, rovetz, will stretch out, lie down. Now remember the metaphor of his parents. What was the metaphor for the Yetzer Hara, the desire to rebel or to go off on your own way? That was the Nachash, which is now a snake, right? So imagine if he does bad, this snake of the potential for sin will stretch out in your doorway. What's the issue? If you have a snake stretched out your doorway, as soon as you go out into the world, it bites you. Right? You go to interact with others, and that sin is nipping at your heels. So God's saying, I don't want that for you. If you don't do good, it'll come into your life more. Every time you don't do good, you know the fiction about vampires, they can't get into your house unless you invite them in. This is the same thing with the snake. If you choose well, the snake doesn't get into your house. But the more you choose bad things, the more the snake gets in there and starts nipping at your heels and driving you to be poisoned, right? Or drawing away your blood like the vampire does. Don't invite them into your house. I'm not talking about people. I'm not talking about sin for people. It's fine to invite them into your house. Don't invite temptation into your house. Don't invite sin into your house. Don't invite anger into your house. His problem is anger and a lack of accountability. Halo im tetiv sate. Isn't it so that if you do good, you will be elevated? V'im lo tetiv lepetach chatat ravaitz. And if you don't do good, to the opening of your tent, sin will stretch itself out for alecha, and to you, Teshukato, it will desire you. That's what his mother was told. She will desire Teshukato, her husband, right? Shuk is the market. What's the market? The market is designed to cause you to desire things that you might buy. Shuk is all about desire. So you go down to the market, they're like, oh, don't you want this beautiful rimon? Don't you want this beautiful pomegranate? Oh, don't you want these beautiful clothes? Or these spices smell good. And you walk around and go, oh, yeah, that smells good. Oh, I want to buy some of that chalva. Oh, I want to get some of that chicken, you know. So the shuk is all about desire. But this is saying to you, sin will desire. If you give it an inch, it'll take a mile. If you make room for sin, it'll come in and it'll impose itself in your tent, right? But what's the last line that God says? V'ata, and you, timshol bo, you will govern it, right? You will overcome it. You will manage it. You won't destroy it. The Yetzer Hara is always going to be there. You're not capable of killing it. You can't rid your life from it completely. There's always going to be the temptation and the desire to do the wrong thing. But you can overcome it. God is telling you with this story, I believe in you. Now remember, Cain hasn't done anything good yet. Not since he brought that, flimsy sacrifice. He's got angry with God, and God is reminding him, I believe in you. I believe that I've set this system up so that you can overcome it. I took the legs off the snake so that it was low down. I weakened it so that you can beat it. God believes that you can overcome. Here comes the heartbreak. V'yomer Cain el Hevel. God spoke to Hevel. Cain, I'm so sorry. Cain spoke to Hevel. Cain, this angry boy who doesn't take account for his own behaviors, goes to speak to his brother, Achiv. El Hevel Achiv, to Hevel his brother. Well, there's hope. Maybe he's going to go make peace. Vayehi, and it was, behi or tam. The verb here is hai, right, to be. Hayot is they were, and it was that they were. The mem here again is them. They, the plural, were, they were, and it was that in that they were, Bersadeh in the field. So he goes down to speak to Hevel in the field. They're talking. Vayakam Cain, and he rose. Cain rose. El Hevel Achiv. He rose onto Hevel his brother. Vayahagehu, and he murdered him. So, was God wrong? Did God not know that he would kill him? God knew that he would do it. But he gave him the opportunity anyway. He told him he believed him in anyway. He gave him the free will to choose good even though he knew he would fail. It's a really interesting thing because God knew that Cain would fail. But if he hadn't given Cain the opportunity not to fail, if he hadn't told him, listen, I've rigged the system in your favor, you can do this, I believe in you. If he hadn't told him all of that, then Cain could say, you never gave me a chance. But God did give him a chance, and he murdered. Now maybe you might feel like I'm stacking too much on Cain. Maybe you feel like I'm not stacking enough on Cain. Because, of course, this conversation where God said, you're getting too angry, you're not managing yourself, happened before his great crime. Before this murder, all he did was bring a reasonably bad vegetable salad. Who cares? But God saw all of this. And what we can see that he saw in Cain's heart afterwards was the reaction. So God sees that Cain murders Hevel. So what does he do? He comes to him just like he came to Adam and Chava in the Gan Eden to speak to him about what's just happened. V'yomer Adonai el Cain, and God says to Cain, Hevel. We talked about this being one of the words that can be where. Eicha, I disputed and said that it might be where are you, but it might also be how. But just Aleph Yod is an old word for where. So Hevel, where is Hevel? Achicha, your brother. Does God not know the answer? God knows the answer, but a lot of these scenes God plays out to teach us something. He sometimes pretends he doesn't know to see what you'll say. Are you going to tell me the truth? Are you going to face up to the accountability of what you did? What's your reaction? Well, Cain's reaction is not good. For Yomer, and he said, Lo yadati. So, yada is the verb to know. Yadati means I knew. Any verb that you add taf yod on the end of a verb, it always means I did it in the past, right? Now, normally, if we say I don't know, we say I don't know in the current text, but it makes sense that this has a slightly different logic, and it says I have not known. Because logically speaking, for you to know or not know something, it also includes the past. Otherwise, if you just know in this moment, I didn't know before, but now I know, it's like I've just found out. But if you're saying about what you know, when someone's asking you a question, what you're saying is, it's not something I've known. I don't know now, I didn't know before. So lo yadati means I do not know. What is your brother? I don't know. And then he adds something. It's bad enough that he lied to God. It means he doesn't really understand God, for a starter. It also means that he doesn't care about lying to God. So there's something that's been in the heart of Cain that's been a problem. But the next line is worse. Hashomer achi anoki. Now, this is a question. So probably the hey, rather than just being the, might be this questioning hey. Now there's a little bit of debate. It could be a the hey. I'm going to pop it as this questioning hey that turns this into a question because we know this is a question. Right? Shomer is the word for a guard or a guardian or someone who guards or someone who keeps and protects. Someone who is Shomer Shabbat is someone who keeps the Shabbat. Someone who's Shomer Mitzvot, someone who keeps the Mitzvot. Shomer Nagia means you keep the laws of family purity. But Shomer Aki is my brother's guardian. And Anochi is the long form of Ani. Ani means I, Anochi means I, but just a slightly more formal sense. So what he's saying is very large and formal and saying, Hashomer Achi Anochi, what am I, my brother's keeper? Oh, careful. God came and spoke to you when you had a problem. You didn't listen. Then you murdered. Then you lied about it. And now you're giving sass? You can see that there was already a problem in the heart of Cain that God could see. And he gave him a pep talk. He said, manage yourself and you'll get better. Isn't it true that if you do good, you will be elevated? But if you don't do good, sin will crouch in the doorway. Clearly what happened here, you didn't do good, you did bad. And sin's come into you and now you're lying to God about it. And you're also being sassy, disrespectful to God. On the tail end of a murder? So, for Yomer, and he said, now this is God speaking, Ma'asita, what did you do? Asa is the general dog's body verb to make or do. Ma means what. And just like when we had yadati, the T means I did it in the past. Ta means you did it in the past. For the second person masculine, the you did it. Ma asita, what did you do? Kal damei achicha. The kal is the voice, this one. Kuf vav lamed is voice, kal. Damei, dam is blood, and a yod and a tsebre means of. The voice of the blood of achika, your brother. So akim alai, screams to me, min ha'adama, from the earth. Now, by the way, this word, so akim, that's used in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah when it talks about the victims of the rapists and abusers and sinners of Sodom and Gomorrah, these people who are offended by kindness, offended by hospitality, and punish people with rape. This is a bad town of rapists. When God says that there's a problem with Sodom and Gomorrah, he says that the voices of their victims tzoakim alai. So this is being compared, that what has happened here is like all of the rapists of Sodom and Gomorrah is what you've done to your brother here. Kol damei achika, the voice of the blood of your brother, tzoakim alai, screams to me, min ha'adama, from the earth. A lot of sins in the Bible, you're told, if you, say for example, chas v'sholom, if you were to steal $5 from your brother, you can't just come and say sorry to God. First of all, you've got to restore the $5 to your brother. But we're also told you've got to return plus a fifth. So you've got to return $6 to your brother, because, it's not enough that he's got his $5 back. You took it from him. You did him a wrong. So you have to do something better than just give him back his $5. You've got to give him more. And then you have to apologize to him, and then you can apologize to God. What does this tell us about murder? You can't restore anything from a murder. You can't give back the life of your brother plus a fifth. This is one of the reasons why murder is so terrible. You've taken someone's whole life from them. And now God is talking to you about how it affects him. That he loved this person. You've not just done a crime to the person, which you have absolutely and primarily done the crime to Hevel, but you've also done a crime to God, because God made this person, loved them, brought them into the world, and you're causing them to suffer. Now, it would be unfair to say that that's the primary issue. When you murder someone, the crime is against the victim. It's not against God, but it's also against God. Because as much as their family suffers, how much more does God suffer, who didn't just knew them for the brief years that they're on this planet, but knew them before and afterwards as well. So, things actually get darker from here on. It's got pretty bad now. And when I say they get darker, they don't get darker in terms of the punishment. That's not the bit that's so dark and terrible. It's the reaction to the punishment. Va'atah, and now. Notice here that we have atah with an ayin and atah with an aleph. Atah with an aleph means you. Atah with an ayin means now. And urur means to curse. Adam was not cursed. The ground was cursed. Compared to living in Gan Eden, of course the ground seemed cursed. He had to actually work it. Before he was just picking fruits off the trees. But to leave Gan Eden to go out into the world felt like not Adam being cursed, but the ground being cursed. But here, Cain is cursed. Va'ata aruata, and now cursed you are, min ha'adama, from the ground. So the ground was cursed from Adam, but Cain is cursed from the ground. The curse is on him, not on the ground. Min ha'adama asher patzta. This is a really strange word. Normally when you say open, you say poteach or petach is to open, right? But patzta is an unusual way to say open. It's a slightly different way of saying it, and it's kind of got a real poetry to it. Here it's patzta et piha, that she opened her mouth. She opened her mouth. Lakachat et damei achika, that she opened her mouth to take. Notice how it's in the feminine, because the ground is feminine. So she opened her mouth, lakachat, to take, et damei achika, to take the blood of your brother. So you're cursed from her, because you took this ground and you corrupted it with the blood of your brother. You fed the earth the blood of your brother. So because you did that, now you're cursed. It says, Ha'adama, the ground, asher patzta, that she took, that she opened, et piha, her mouth, lekachat, to take, et damei achicha, to take the blood of your brother, miyadecha, from your hand. So how does he react when faced with exactly what he did? God goes on to say, Ki, thus, ta'avod et ha'adama lo tosef. So you shall work the ground no more. You will not add to... Sorry, I'm going to break that differently. I'm going to break it after Adama. Ki ta'avod et ha'adama, thus if you work the ground, lo tosef tate koacha. If you work the ground, she will not add to give kocha. Now koach is strength. Kocha is her strength. So saying thus now, if you work the ground, she won't give you anything. Right? He's an arable farmer, and God's saying you don't get to be that anymore. You don't get to be who you are. You've lost the privilege of drawing your food from the ground. You're starting again. You've got a new thing. Right? It says, Lach navaned. Go, wander, and be a nomad. Tiyeh ba'aretz. The nad tiyeh ba'aretz means a nomad you will be in the land. A wanderer. You don't get a fixed abode anymore. You don't get to put down roots. You've just got to walk. You've got to go. So you're banished, really. You know, we had Adam was living in the Gan Eden, and he had a choice. Him and his wife together decided to eat from the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. And God said, okay, so that's what you chose, so you don't get to eat from the tree of life. Before you could eat from the tree of life, but you've decided to know good and evil, so now you've got to go and live a life. You don't get to eat from the tree of life anymore and be immortal. Now you've got to go off and live in the world. And he moved them a little bit away so that they weren't just there hanging out at the door of Gan Eden wishing that they could come back in or trying to get back in. No, you have to move away a little bit. So they move a little way a bit, but God's still with them. God's still blessing them. God's still making he makes clothes for them and dresses them like a loving parent. You know, and he blesses them with children. She recognizes, I have a child because God blessed me with a child. You know, they're seeing the blessing in all that they get. And then this guy murders, and he has to go even further. He can't stay anymore where he was. He can't put down roots. He can't farm anymore. He's got to wander. So he's, you know, a hunter-gatherer now. He can't do agriculture. It's a pretty light sentence. It's not 25 years to life. It's you can't stay here. You've got to be like that. V'yomer Kayin, and this is the dark bit. This is the bit. This is too much. V'yomer Kayin. And Cain said, El Adonai, to God, Gadol Avoni min sa. So, he's faced with this. He got a pep talk from God to manage himself. He didn't listen. He murdered his brother. God comes to say, what happened to your brother? Well, I don't know. What am I, his keeper? God said, the blood of your brother screams to me from the grave. So you can't stay here anymore. You can't be a farmer anymore. You've got to leave. And he says, El Adonai, to God, Gadol, great Avoni, my suffering, Minasa, to lift up. It's too big a suffering for me to lift. This punishment is too hard for me. He's complaining. With all the mercy, all the opportunities he's got to do better, he's complaining that God's been too heavy-handed, too harsh with him. This is the problem with Cain, and this is why God didn't accept his sacrifice in the first place. Because God knew that there was no accountability in him. God knew that when he would bring a sacrifice, if God didn't accept it, then he would start kicking off and say, it's your fault. He's blaming God. My sacrifice was fine. I was the first one to bring the sacrifice. I'm a good boy. You know, if you ever hear those stories about men that go and try and talk to a woman, and then when the woman's just not interested because she's not interested, the guy starts saying, "Oh, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? Don't you like nice guys?" You know, this guys who can't just accept maybe she's just not that into you. You know, he brings a sacrifice and he's like, "Why aren't you more grateful to God? Why do you think you have vegetables in the first place? God gave you the vegetables. You're giving something back. And you don't do that so that, you know, God's going to clap and say, oh, I'm going to stick it on the fridge. No, just give a gift as a gift. Leave it at that. And if you want a better relationship with God, ask, how can I make this better? How can I improve our relationship? Hevel did it by giving the best of the best of the best that he could. Cain did it by giving something and then going, why aren't you more pleased? Are you not entertained? So God says, okay, you know what, I'm not going to react to this because I can see his decisions playing out in front of me. So I'm going to give him a chance. I'm going to ask him, before I accept his sacrifice, I'm going to ask him, why aren't you happy? Why are you sad? Why is your face fallen? Why are you angry with me, with God? That gave you life, that gave you a world to live in, that gave you opportunities, that give you the ability to be a farmer. I give you everything. There's nothing that you have that didn't come from me. And when you bring me a sacrifice, you're angry at me? What's the problem here? Don't you know that if you do good, more good will come and you'll be elevated? That if you do bad, then sin will crouch at your doorway and will desire you. That's a problem for you. And then it happens exactly as God told him it would. Listen, he goes and he murders his brother. And then he lies about it. And then he gives sass to God. And God says, you can't be here anymore. If you're going to be like this, go away and live. And he says, it's too great a punishment. Even after all of that, he doesn't accept any accountability. He doesn't seek to improve. He doesn't ask, is there any way I can get back into your good books? Is there any way I can be redeemed? No, he just says, the punishment's too much for me. So God says, go. And then he says, this is in the subsequent verses, listen, anyone could just murder me. He has shown no remorse that he murdered his brother, but he starts complaining someone could kill me. And even then God says, so I'll put a sign on you that no one can. Everyone who sees you will know, can't kill this guy. But you still have to go. Because you still don't have any accountability. You still haven't shown any remorse for killing your brother. I'm ad-libbing here, I'm adding to this, but it seems to be so clear because I've seen someone with an anger problem and I've given them the talk and I've seen the ones that manage to turn it around and the ones that manage never to take any accountability. There are some people who will protect their lack of accountability. And the thing that we have to do for them is to help them to realize you're not a passive, weak person who's at the whim of everything that happens around you. You're powerful. You have potential. You can do good if you want to. You can improve your life if you want to. If you try to improve your life, I'll help you. But if you take no accountability, you have to move away because you're not getting anything from this situation. So why didn't God accept Cain's sacrifice in the first place? It wasn't because he didn't like salads. It wasn't that he really wanted a burger from the other brother. It was that he saw that Cain needed teaching. He needed guidance. He needed redeeming from the situation that he was choosing. And he gave him an opportunity to turn around, and Cain didn't take it. So why is this still in the Bible? Why is it still there if it didn't work? Because you and I, we can read it and we can learn from Cain, and we can make the choice he should have made. To let go of some of that anger, some of that jealousy, some of that resentment of the other people who feel like they're doing better than us. Maybe taking a bit of accountability. Maybe seek guidance from God. Maybe have a different outcome than he did, than Cain did. Thank you very much for your time. Speak soon.